Hello, my name is Dr. Wave Nunnally with Evangel University, and I'm here in my capacity as an instructor for the Center for Holy Land Studies. And in the coming months, I'll be answering your toughest Bible questions in a new question and answer series that we're using to dive deeper into the Bible. Now, our question for today is, what is the intertestamental period and is it important? Great question to start with. The intertestamental period goes by other names, like the interbiblical period or the period between the testaments. In other words, we're talking about the time period between the writing of the last books of the Old Testament, like the prophecy of Malachi, up through the beginning of the New Testament, beginning with the Gospel of Matthew. This question really belies an even deeper question, and that is something that has to do with the nature of God. It has to do with what we call in biblical studies the immutability of God, meaning that God does not change. There are lots of Christians today, entire groups in fact, that believe that God acted in fundamentally different ways and interacted with people differently at different time periods in history. When we talk about an intertestamental period, it almost suggests that God was on break for 450 to 500 years, or that He in some way disengaged with His creation because there's nothing going on biblically at that time. I'd like to suggest that nothing can be further from the case. Let's look at it from two different perspectives. Let's look at the book of Daniel from the Old Testament perspective. And if you look at the second half of the book of Daniel, you find all kinds of detailed prophecies that come to pass in the intertestamental period. For example, the rise of two kings that are called the King of the North and the King of the South. This is happening after Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great is conquering the Middle East in 333, 332 BC. And so this is well in the middle of the intertestamental period. But he gives prophecies that are fulfilled in the intertestamental period, which means that God is intimately involved with His creation, very much an active actor in human history, fulfilling prophecy in the intertestamental period. Now let's look at it from the New Testament perspective. In the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, we hear all kinds of stories about John the Baptist's mother and father, an angel appearing to Mary, another angel appearing to Joseph. We hear about miraculous conceptions and miraculous births. And so none of this is in the, quote, New Testament period proper, because in many of those instances, Jesus has not been born. Jesus has not begun His ministry. John the Baptist has not been born or begun his ministry. So we are indeed in the intertestamental period in the beginning stories of both of these Gospels. And so both the Old and the New Testament are telling us that the intertestamental period, quote unquote, is actually a period of God's very much active involvement. When we look at other texts like the Dead Sea Scrolls or the books of the Maccabees, we hear that people are believing and they're obeying and they're praying to a God that they believe is very imminent, very involved, and answering their needs and responding to their present day situations. The intertestamental period is full of activity, all kinds of developments, like the development of the synagogue, the development of the Sanhedrin, the development of Jewish groups like Pharisees and Sadducees, the rise of the Roman Empire to prominence and control over the land of Israel, the rise of dynasties like the dynasty that was founded by Herod the Great. We are not told about where these things come from or where these people or dynasties come from in the New Testament. The New Testament basically assumes that we understand all of this stuff. Unfortunately, often that is not the case. And so the intertestamental period, and is it important for us today? Absolutely. Ask your neighbors that are right to the left and right of you how much they know of you, and then compare that to people who live 6, 7, 8 homes down the block, and you'll see that your immediate next door neighbors know infinitely more about you than do those living further away. The intertestamental period is the immediate next door neighbor of the New Testament. If you want to understand Jesus, John the Baptist, the Gospels, Jesus' teaching, His life and ministry in its fullness, in their fullness, then the intertestamental period is most definitely the closest next door neighbor and is the immediate gateway into the world of our New Testament. Well, that's it for today, but you can send your toughest Bible questions or anything that you've just been wondering about to the email listed at the bottom of this screen. We'll be choosing from some of these and answering them in the coming months. In addition, if you have a desire to grow in your understanding of the Word of God in its original cultural, historical, geographical, and spiritual context, then the Center for Holy Land Studies offers a variety of study tours throughout the year, including more in-depth study programs in the land of Israel designed for anyone wanting a deeper study experience. You can find all of these tours on the CHLS website at holylandsstudies.org.